Okay, my name is Dante Grimes.
I'm Jordan Harris.
Dylan Gilbert.
Maggie Hill.
We pitched to him the communism/Marxism is what he would rather us like focus tailored on.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you guys want to start? Like, you want to start with like some definitions, or like start with Karl Marx, or
I would
like,
say define communism.
Define communism. So the definition of communism that I have is there's three, like they're all the same, they're just different usages of the word communism. So the first one's a system in which goods are owned in a common and are available to all as needed. The second one is a theory advocating elimination of private property. And the third is a totalitarian system of government in which a single authoritarian party controls state-owned means of production. Do you all agree with that? You think it's pretty...
I think those are the common uses.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
When I think of communism, that's about what I think of.
Right, basically just like government controlling all means of production. Yeah. Communism is a version of Marxism that's been implemented. Nobody really implements Marxism. They implement the offshoots of it, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think there's one subset. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's like named after the guy from Vietnam. I think,
you talking about the Maoism, the Chinese stuff?
Yeah. I thought he was Vietnamese.
Is he Vietnamese?
I thought he was Vietnamese.
Quick.
I think that when a country claims to be communist, they kind of name it after whatever person's in power. At least that's what it seemed like when I was like looking up information.
That's in China.
Yeah, China.
That's China. I thought it was Vietnam.
Yeah, that was. There was a time.
Well, wasn't there
like
a
right
communist around, yeah, isn't that?
So yeah, Vietnam had its version of communism/socialism for a while. Actually, my aunt's dad escaped. It was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s kind of time frame.
Mm-hmm.
They left, I think, in the 70s because two of her sisters and her brother were both born there, and then they all left on a boat in the middle of the night one night. But yeah, that was like all around that same time frame. Most of the implementation of communism/Marxism has been like probably USSR was like the first governmental form of it. I think it really started with more like the Bolsheviks and the revolution. Before that, it was more just like people talking about it.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know if I want to like jump in yet. Does anybody else have anything to add about? Because I feel like we should also state like what it meant to us. Like whenever I thought of communism, it was, for one, my mind always went straight to the USSR.
Yeah,
that's the most common.
So visualization wise, I think like when I hear communism in theory, like the verbiage version, I more think of just like a top down system, like a government, not even just a government controlling everything, but like a government planning everything. Like, okay, this is how each city's going to be laid out. Here's how people are going to live in this section. Somebody's going to work in this section. These type of businesses are here. You know, like the traffic will go this way, and there'll be traffic lights here, kind of thing. Just like
I basically just think of China. Just like.
Oh, you like current China?
Yeah. Just whenever.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
like the most common
that's just what I like. My mind goes to.
They're kind of a capitalist, aren't they?
No, they're communists.
They're communists, but like.
So Hong Kong is. It's capitalist. It's almost like zero regulations in Shanghai and Hong Kong, I think. But the rest, so like they're the way that they make all the money. So it's a different form of communism right now in China. It's still communism, but what they do is they allow certain types of capitalism, but it's government controlled capitalism. So like even their dollars, like what they're worth and stuff, it's artificially like maintained by the government. Like they're like, okay, this is worth this much money. At all, like, you know what I mean? Like for a loaf of bread, they're like, okay, it's worth 5. What do they use, yen in China?
Yeah,
is that right?
No, actually, that's Japan, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Did y'all read the Communist Manifesto in high school?
Currency.
I just can't like really remember much of it.
So we never like read it in high school, like just straight out read the whole Communist Manifesto. We've definitely.
Yeah,
it's probably red. Yeah. We never really like read the whole thing outright. We more just like talk about passages when we did talk about it. I took a civics course my junior year, and we did some talk on it.
It basically just tells the platform of the Communist Party.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, the Communist Manifesto. Yeah, that was like literally like his.
It's basically just
him
like his,
and I don't know who. I don't know because Karl Marx is always one.
And
like,
it was-
Friedrich Engels.
yeah, Engels.
Marx
his
is always
buddy.
the one that's whenever you think about the Communist Manifesto, he's always one you hear. Like I've never heard of the other
Yeah.
guy. I knew there was a co-author, but I never knew who it was until now.
I think it's just because, like, you know, after that, the term Marxism came out, and I think Engels helped him write it, but I think a lot of it was Marx, like, going out and spreading it, so
Oh,
people
yeah, because he went out
associated
and
it more with
talked
Marx
all
and
about
Engels.
it. Did he not go to London? He went to London and talked about it, didn't he? Like
I'm
tried
sure
to
he
spread
did.
it around rather than just like keep it in Germany.
Yeah, he didn't just like sit in his couch and talk about it.
Yeah, and most times when you have like a paper like that and there's a co-writer, the co-writer doesn't really do much. They just kind of add their little statement to their paper.
Yeah.
To the paper.
It also depends on what you're talking about, though, because like sometimes it's like it can be either they legit like co-wrote it and they're like working back and forth with it, or like I know in like scientific papers, for example, like sometimes you might have, of course, like you have like an author, but like a lot of times it's like this person just participated. They didn't really like you're not necessarily like a writer.
Yeah.
Crap, you had something on there I was actually gonna look at in reference. Can you go back to the document real quick?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing though that came out of like Marx's ideas was that whole idea of critical theory,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the way a lot of the derivations of Marxism are derived, like they come from now, is like this whole idea of critical theory. So the definition that I got for it was like a philosophical approach to culture and especially to literature that seeks to confront the social, historical, and ideological forces and structures that produce and constrain it. The term is applied particularly to the work of the Frankfurt School. So when it's been explained to me, it's more of this idea that whatever is right now should be challenged, no matter what it is.
The Frankfurt School was, they were just unhappy with the capitalists that were in charge at the time.
So yeah, I think that's where it comes from.
It kind of makes sense, and it's funny to me because when you think about times back then, communism, if you really think about it, it kind of made sense. Just because, especially back then, like workers were really like they weren't. I wouldn't say they weren't appreciative, of course, but they were really taken advantage of. Like regulation in like safety, the work hours, like they were worked to the bone. So I think it like communism would really appeal to a lot of the people that were working at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like I've talked to you about this before. Like,
Yeah.
I think even though it's never like it seems back as like it's a restriction on what I can have and what I can own, and I get that part. But I think as a like even the first definition, a system which goods are owned in common and available to all as needed. That comes from a place of not necessarily like just you can't have more than someone else, but more everybody should be able to like everybody should have like everybody should just be careful. Like that's what I told you. Like everybody should be like
Yeah, so like the only problem with that I see is like it certainly will appeal to workers more so than it will to other people. But I think that whole idea of like as people need, like it's kind of hard to say who needs what. So then you give somebody the power to say, oh, you don't need something. Like they make the determination of what you need instead of you making the determination. So it's less individualistic. And then that takes away from like your power as the individual to make choices for your own. Like good or for good or bad, like now you can say, okay, I want to buy a hamburger. It may make me fat. It tastes good. I want it. Versus somebody saying, no, you need like rice, chicken, and a salad, and that's what you get for today because that's the amount of nutrition that you need for the day.
mm-hmm.
And that would be like communism, like telling you,
It's just choice versus
right.
not.
So like it's still choice, and communism is choice for the people who are at the top, really.
Yeah. People at the top definitely get like more say in so what they want other people to do
Right.
compared to what people that aren't at the top get to.
And that's
Right.
like that's the proletariat and bourgeoisie. Like that's what Karl Marx, like that's where it began
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not saying that it's, of course, I don't think anything is really perfect. Like, I think even capitalism has its issues, which, I mean, nothing is ever, like I said, nothing's ever perfect.
Yeah,
But like
sure.
I said, I think,
Especially in implementation.
yeah, and I think, like I said, communism may come from a good place, but it's hard to implement without it seeming like what you said, like, if it, I don't know. I'm trying to think about a way to say, like I said, it still makes sense that having, like, a common, just everybody being cared for. Like I said, it comes from a good place, but all the implementations that we've seen throughout history have just said, no, like communism is absolutely horrible. Like it destroys every country that it ever like deals with.
Well, so far it has though. Like that's the thing. Like the empirical data. Has
no, I
shown,
know,
like,
and I'm agreeing with that. I'm just saying like that's the problem is like until someone can think about like I feel like it would work on a lot smaller of a scale.
Sure. So like there's actually been like the way that I think about it. I think like so if you take our system right now and the whole like federalist idea to where like there's the government at the federal level, there's a state government, there's local governments, and then there's like communities. I think communism is perfectly fine if it's in a community that you can leave and that you can control decisions as a group. More so like it'd be like an oligarchy, except the oligarchy is everybody because the group is so small that everybody can have a say.
Yeah.
As soon as you put it at the federal level or even the state level, it gives like a handful of people all the power to control the lives of 360 plus million people in the United States. Just for the United States, like, you know, other countries would be even more, just because it's not possible for everybody in the United States to like have a direct say in everything that everybody else does.
Yeah, I mean we have that issue now though. Like,
sure, I think it's too big now.
yeah.
So like I think there should be more, and maybe communism would work, or like it work in our society if we didn't let the federal government control so much as they do, and we let the states and the cities do what they wanted to.
Control more.
Like if one city wants to be communist and all the work gets distributed evenly in the city and everybody's happy with it, sure. But like as soon as you put it at the federal level, it can't work just because there's so many people.
I also feel like it also works if in like community like you said, somebody can leave because it also plays the effect of like people that are very similar. Like, you know, you probably go to a community where you're more likely to like get along with other people.
Sure, yeah.
People that are more like you. And so I feel like if you were to like go to a rural area in like the, I don't know, freaking like Ohio, Kentucky, someplace that's really like agriculturally based, like you could probably implement something like this in a community like that. Probably because they kind of live off of needs anyway.
Sure, yeah, they have less of an incentive to
yeah.
like stockpile all this like, you know, they don't have needs for like computers and jets and all this like material stuff because their work takes up most of their time. It's not like a leisure.
Yeah, you can like almost think of it as like the Amish, like how they only get what they need in that time. They don't go over what they need.
Right.
And I also think it's like an ideological thing. You could also run it down to just greed of people, and like it's not, because I get people want stuff. It's not bad to want, but like.
Well, sure, as long as you come by it honestly. Like, if you're willing to work for it.
Yeah, and like I completely understand why it's like seen as like a bad system, because like I said, it's ruined every country.
I think so. I have the number in here on these notes, and I think there is approximately 125 million people have deaths associated to communism/socialism in the past. I think it's since the Holocaust was when they first started counting that.
And one thing I thought was really and I think another reason it gets such a bad rep is because you look at it in these like I can't even say it. Totalitarian. I could not say it. Totalitarian governments, and they're so what's the word I'm looking for? Tyrannistic? Is that
Tyrannical?
Tyrannical, yeah. Like Mao Zedong. Like when I was in middle school, we actually read. Is it Red Scarf Girl? It's a book
I know what you're
about
talking about.
a girl growing up, like during the time of Mao Zedong, like what she went through in school, her family, and it's really sad to actually actually see how the people were kept down, like, and oppressed during that time. But it's also like it hasn't been. I don't think there's ever been like a democratic nation, like quote unquote democratic nation, that's tried to implement something like this.
Yeah.
Like it's usually a country that's under like tyrannical rule anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think and that's one of the main problems with communism at the massive, you know, federal/country scale, is that somebody has to make like for top-down system to work, where this, you know, the state controls the means of production and the design of everything in the country. Somebody has to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And at that point, the person who makes a decision now has immense power. Like they have the power to almost do whatever they want. So like when you give them that much power, that's when their greed takes over, and they take as much power and as much money as they want, which is why it might work on a smaller individual basis because there's not somebody with a ton of power.
And that's one of the things in like the video I watched about communism or socialism. What the guy was talking about is one of the problems with it is that no one ever like when communism was thought of to be like implemented, it was so that like the government set these rules or whoever was in charge set the rules, and then they were done. Like they're no longer in power and they become one of like the people like contributing.
Yeah.
So you'd set rules that would make sense,
Right.
and then you'd leave it at that. But no one ever does that. No one ever just says these are the rules. Like these make sense. These are like these are valid. Like no one can ever do that and just let go of the power. They always have.
Well, that's
the
just so
greed
hard
behind
to do because like things change. Like even in our system, we have a constitution where the rules are set, but there is a process to add.
Change,
right.
and add.
Which
if
I
you
think-
go through the correct process, you can add and change things, which is like it's nearly impossible just to set up rules because then as time progresses, you can't stop things from changing. Like they're just going to alter, situations are going to arise.
Which is also why it's hard to do on, like I said, like we said, a larger scale. Because
Right.
if you were to do this on a smaller scale, it wouldn't make sense just to be like everybody get together. Things like say the economy's changing, and you're like, this is no longer something we can like feasibly do anymore. We have to switch, like from agriculture to mining, for example. Like we need to discuss new regulations. Like you could do that on like a small town. Like they could literally come together in a meeting and just be like, we all vote. This is what's going to happen.
Yep.
Blah blah blah. But you can't do that now. Like it would, for one, it's just not feasible. There are way too many people.
Way too many people.
And plus, like people don't actually contribute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's hard to do now. But
Well,
I think if you were to like do it on a small scale, and then say if that community were to start growing more and more, it'd be a lot easier than if you just try to take like a current like capitalist country and just switch them over. Like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, like the revolution. So I think at some point though, it reaches its maximum limit. Like even if it grows and grows and grows, at some point it's going to become so big where somebody has to make a decision. Like if you took like a town like New York, and let's say it was communist, like it's still a small community, still falls under we're working under federalism in our society, and you made it communist. There's so much money and so much labor and so many decisions that have to be made. It wouldn't be feasible for is it 4 million people that live in New York?
It's
Something
a
like
lot.
that.
But
A
at that
few
point,
million people.
at that point,
everybody
wouldn't you-
tried to vote on every single issue every single day that affected everybody. So the reason behind this is like the decisions that affect everybody should have a say in. Is the whole like idea of the people controlling the government. At that point, there's so many decisions that affect everybody, and there's so many people. Even the time alone for everybody to come together and just vote without discussing it, just to vote on it, would be an immense amount of time that you wouldn't be able to work. You would be only voting, and that's not even discussing what you should vote on or why you should vote on.
Yeah,
it's
like
just doing the voting.
Yeah, like setting a time frame. Like this is the time you have to go vote during the day, and if you don't, whatever happens.
Right, which then it's not everybody in the community contributing to the decision making. It's the people who were able to
Go
vote
at that time,
which is what we have now.
Yeah.
So we just take down our amount of decisions that have to be made and break them down at those different levels.
And we just take away like the checks and balances
Right.
of all how our society is put together.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the David Harvey videos?
So that's really what I got out of the David Harvey video was this whole like critical theory idea of like whatever you see now, think basically the opposite of it. Like critical theory, like I said, as explained to me, was like whatever is now, try to change it. So I think the only problem with that is like when you're trying to change things, you don't like some of them might be correct.
Yeah.
Like we might have done things correct, now, which is why like
I always think there's an improvement to be done. I mean,
sure,
that's just
improvement,
me.
but like the whole idea of critical theory is almost just like spin everything on its head and do like the opposite of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like some things, it might be able to improve, but is it worth improving? Like certain things might be at that peak where the input versus output ratio is you have a diminishing return.
Yeah.
It's not worth improving right now because there's other things that we have to improve on, which is why I like the Socratic method more than critical theory, just because it's like, okay, let's ask questions and see what's broken before we try to fix stuff. Not just, let's go fix everything. No matter what it is, let's fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's find out what's broken, what's the most broken.
And then how you can fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have steps to fix it before you break it. So like when you're fixing things, you have to take it apart to fix it. So in this whole critical theory idea, it's like we're just going to change stuff. It's not like, okay, we've got a plan. Here's how we're going to change it. Here's why we're going to change it. Here's the way we can do it. It's more just like, okay, I see that, like, let's say there's an injustice. Like they say there's obviously inequality in our society, you know, good, bad, whatever. So, like, let's say you have a girl and a guy, and the girl's getting paid less, and the guy's getting paid more. Critical theory would more just say, okay, swap it. Now the girl gets paid more than the guy. Well, does that really fix a problem? No, it just might change the problem.
Yeah,
like,
it changes the problem into something different.
Right. It's not the problem you saw before.
Like, but now you have a new problem.
Right, but now you got a new problem, and why did you do what you did? Why did you switch, you know, dollar amounts? What does that do?
Well, that doesn't seem to really critical theory doesn't really help anything, does it?
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Like, so the way it was explained to me is like critical theory doesn't actually lead you to critical thinking. It's more just like you don't have to critically think because it's just doing the reverse or just doing something different than what is now. Doesn't matter what it is, just do it differently.
Yeah, it leads you to critical error.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to think because I feel like we kind of summed up communism.
Should we go into Socratic method or?
I'm trying to relate it back to communism.
So
Okay,
so I think the next logical step would be like, I know it's not great to generalize things, but since the implementation of Marx's ideas today are essentially the same, like within a grasp of a region, like you can kind of break things down into like totalitarianism versus like this liberty and like individual aspect of everything. I think that instead of looking at, like right now we have this political dichotomy is what most people see is like a right and a left.
Yeah.
But if you really think about it, it's more like a big circle where you have like individuality and liberty and freedom at the top and like somebody else controlling you at the bottom. So you have like two different versions of the same thing. Like the Nazi party, the fascists, the Nazi stands for National Socialist Party. It was just a National Socialist Party based on only Germany, not like based on the world. Like socialism would be like the USSR is like, okay, the USSR is better than everybody else, and we're gonna do top-down government. We're gonna promote, Russian citizens. We're gonna do all this work so that Russia gets ahead. And Germany was basically doing the same thing. With Hitler, he was like, government controlled. The economy was government controlled. The means of distribution were government controlled. He just wanted to keep it within Germany. He was like a socialist isolationist is what he was. He wanted just Germany. So like if those two are equal, then the next thing you have is like democratic socialism and maybe like, I don't know, what's his name from Italy at the time, Mussolini.
Yeah.
He'd be like Nazi light kind of guy.
Yeah,
and then that'd be like democratic socialism on the same side of the circle.
I haven't heard that since A push.
Yeah,
that's a throwback.
And then just like as
That's
you
a
move up the
huge
circle, then you
throwback.
get to like corporatism on the right side of the circle, and like I don't know what would be equal to corporatism, like maybe kind of like mercantilism, like what they have in like Sweden and Denmark right now is like they have a capitalist economy with like zero corporate regulations, but they have like a socialist distribution for like the citizens.
I was literally going to use
Yeah.
Denmark specifically as a reference
Yeah.
because of like socialist countries that are kind of working. But
So they're I don't know what they call him, the president, their governor, or whatever. He came out and
it's
said that
probably
they're-
like a prime
Wait,
minister.
in
yeah,
what
something
country?
like that. Denmark and like all the Scandinavian countries, they actually came out and said that they're not socialist. So like they have I think they call it, is it mercantilism or it's like a market economy or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's been basically we're like all capitalism and then using the money from capitalism to do like socialist things at the citizen level. So like their corporate tax rate though is like 15%.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right, so they can make a ton of money with the corporations that they use because the tax rate's so low, the corporations can make so much money
that it gives them more
that
money.
then gives more
yeah.
money to the people. So they kind of, a lot of people point to those as socialist countries, but even they came out and said that they're not really socialists. They're more of like market
I think they
economy.
came out like that because they're saying we're not socialist, but we have socialist tendencies. But that's like saying with any kind of government, because anyone can have like a certain.
If
That's
you,
where we're going right now. Like
Yeah.
the United States is completely going towards like a socialist like
Style of work.
citizen level
Yeah,
stuff.
working.
It's weird to me that people like see socialism and they get scared though. Like I don't understand why
because of the history of socialism. So like a lot of people want control over their lives, and socialism tells you somebody else is gonna like plan out how you're gonna do stuff.
Yeah.
So like in China right now, socialist, communist, whatever, flavor of tea they've got in China going on.
wow.
Well, I mean, so like if you're good at math in school, they're like, okay, you're gonna go be an engineer or a mathematician or a doctor. Like if you're not, you're good at music, you're gonna go play for our orchestra. Like they tell you where you go instead of being like, oh, you like to do these things, okay, go get better at doing those things. It's like, oh, we see that your brain works this way, so you're going to go over there and work on that computer for
So that's your field. Go
Right.
do that.
You have no choice in the matter.
I think that's interesting.
Which, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but like
no.
it makes sense for like because I'm a music person, so like,
Yeah.
if you look at like China's and like all the socialist communists like type of areas when they're raising a student like their kids, if you look at their student like their kids that are in like probably like middle school for our school system,
Right.
they're like professionals at whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Like they're like there's professional musicians at like age
Yeah.
like 13, and that's kind of like if you look at how we are, it's like that's crazy because
Yeah.
you don't become a professional until you get like to your almost your 30s here.
Yeah.
It's just like the way of life,
I think we don't spend enough
raising
time.
like kids in that like lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's all or nothing. Like,
It's kind of I can see like how it seems like the U.S. is switching over because it's kind of like directing kids all towards one area now.
So I
like,
think
to
that's a
kinda push.
problem. Like I think actually I'm writing a paper right now on changing the education system to where it's like more choice. Like the parents and the students have more choice. Like if they recognize that a child's really good at music, why should they spend all their time learning geography?
I
Like
feel
if
like
their
there's
contribution to society is in music, let them choose to do that and go get better at like a good school for music.
one thing I think is from at least from my thing is like it's important for kids to at least have a baseline. Like I know people like
Sure.
hate like Common Core, but at the same time I hate. I was like, oh, I don't want to take these classes. I'm not interested in them. But at the same time, it's important for a kid to at least have basic algebra. Just do
So I
basic things in their head.
think that could be true up to the beginning of high school.
And no, but that's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
like basic like history of your country or like international history, because one of the problems that you see, and I really am not saying it's only for these people. This like the primary examples I see is like you always see like the crazy like Republicans that literally have no idea what they're talking about, and I bet that's not the liberal side too. Like
Oh,
you see
for
like
sure.
the crazy
I mean,
people on
you've seen,
either
like,
side.
Like the
that-
Antifa people who don't even talk. They just
yeah,
like
like
smash
they literally
windows.
have no idea what they're talking about, and I'm just like, if you would take 2 seconds to literally look at a map or to literally open a book, you probably see that these issues are happening for a reason.
I think that's a problem like across the board. I think we need more intellectualism and more like conversations like this is where it really needs to go, even for like high school level